Hello! I have been meaning to make this video for a while, and I've been putting it off, but today I decided to be really brave about it. So here we are. Today we are here to talk about my two favorite markers, Copic markers and Ohuhu markers. And we're just going to do a little comparison and talk about the good and the bad of each marker. Now, spoiler alert, I think it's essential for me to tell you that I absolutely love both of these markers. And I have actually worked with both companies on multiple occasions and done reviews with each of them. And personally, I find that there aren't as many differences between the two as you might think. It's all just a matter of preference and budget, really. This video is not sponsored by either brand and is purely just for fun, and I'm hoping it might help anyone who's on the fence about choosing between the two markers. So comparing the two directly, the immediate difference that you'll notice are the barrels and the tips of the markers. The Copic markers are a gray, kind of like squashed or oval shape, which I personally love because I feel like you never have to worry about these rolling off your desk. The Ohuhu markers, on the other hand, are white and completely rounded, but they did opt for that little tab on the marker cap that keeps them from rolling around too much. The nibs themselves, I think, have the biggest difference though, and this is really a matter of preference. But the Ohuhu nibs come to a more drastic tapered point, whereas the Copic markers are kind of fatter in the middle before coming to a point. Overall, the Copic nibs are a tiny bit bigger, and I feel like they can cover a larger surface area a little bit faster, but the Ohuhu nibs almost make a more fine point when you're being light-handed enough. But I will say the material that they're made out of is pretty different. I don't know exactly what each nib is made of, but I do find that over time the Ohuhu nibs have a tendency to almost, like, fray? I don't know if I'm explaining it right, but some of my more used Ohuhu markers are harder to get a super fine point out of because the tip of the marker isn't as sharp as when it was new, whereas the Copic markers I've had since high school haven't changed, other than drying out or getting crusty, but that happens with all markers. But the good news is, both of these markers offer nib replacements and ink refills, which of course drastically increases your marker's shelf life, and to me that's the most important thing to look for in a marker. And I feel like that's really what makes these two markers the best of the best, in my opinion. So I did a few swatches here and there on this paper just to kind of show you guys the difference between the two, and hopefully make a little bit more of a fair comparison with a super close color. I did use a few different blending techniques like feather blending and just doing like the circular motions and really laying the ink on the paper to kind of show you the difference in bleeding and blending, and there really is not a very big difference. I honestly even thought that at the very least the Ohuhu markers would bleed a little bit more, but I have not noticed a difference between the two. So yeah, performance-wise, I feel like these are both incredible. And I do think it's important to remind you that while I did my best to color match, none of the colors between the two brands are exactly the same in this video, and for that reason I encourage you not to make any judgments based on color comparison. Instead, I'm just going to be comparing ink performance and overall marker design. So I decided for this video I wanted it to be as fair of a comparison as possible, and I felt like to do that I should draw something really simple. So I did draw this first on my iPad, and I did my best to make sure both sides of the drawing were exactly the same. Then I printed it out and just transferred it onto my Strathmore toned tan paper. This paper isn't necessarily ideal for markers because it's not the heaviest and it's not the smoothest, but it's my favorite paper. I like it because I can use a combination of markers and pencils, which I do at the end of this video. Plus, the tan base color is just really nice. Then I needed to think of some color combinations, and I thought of two that I really liked, but I knew I needed to make sure that I had the right marker colors for it. So I tested a few out on some printer paper, and I love the look of both of these, but I'm definitely biased because I love a good blue and orange color combo. I will say I do wish that I had gone with the blue and purple combination though. The reason I didn't is because I did run into some issues when testing out colors with the Ohuhu side. I have the 120 set of Ohuhu markers, which comes with a really good variety of colors, but not exactly the ones I wanted for this drawing. But I do kind of wish that I'd gone that direction anyway, because I feel like I definitely could have made it work, but I know that if I had gone that direction, I would have regretted it anyway and wished that I'd done the blue and orange. Grass is always greener on the other side, you know? Let me know what your favorite color combination is, and if you think I should have done purple. But be nice to me, because I'll cry. Anyway, I've had this drawing ready for a couple weeks now, and I've been putting it off because I've been scared to ruin it, but today I decided to face my fears, and I'm pretty happy with how it turned out. So sometimes I like to start coloring directly on top of my sketch and then do the line art after, but you'll see me realize really quickly here that when I started shading, I was losing sight of the sketch underneath, so I had to go in and ink parts of the face so that I didn't lose the details, but because it was so hard to see, I had to basically kiss the paper in order to like see the lines of my sketch. So you don't see me inking the eyes like at all because my big old fat head is in the way. I will spoil it right now and just say I do think the Ohuhu side ends up being my favorite of the two, but let me know what you think in the comments. I really did my best to keep the colors as close to each other as possible, but obviously I'm working with limited options, because I do have a large set of Ohuhu, but not the exact same colors as my Copic collection. And to be fair, while I have an absurdly large collection of Copic markers, a lot of them are dead or drying out, and I think that kind of contributed to my preference for the Ohuhu side, just because the Ohuhu markers are newer and they're a lot juicier, which made for like a way smoother overall color. So on to the markers. Ohuhu markers are listed on their website for $2.49 each. That's in US dollars. And of course, I'm sure the sets bring that price down even lower depending on which one you go for. This is a steal, in my opinion, as someone who grew up with Copic markers. They also do sell ink refills, which I think is a relatively recent development, at least within the last few years. Because I remember when Ohuhu markers were on the rise and I was just starting to hear about them all over the internet, and I looked up whether they had refills because that's really important to me, and they didn't. And I think at the time they also didn't sell individual markers, which I thought was odd, if I'm remembering correctly. But now they have all kinds of different sets, individual markers, refills, and they do also have nib replacements, which again is another really important feature to me as an artist. The exact Ohuhu markers I have are the 120 color set with the fine and brush tip. And I do have to say, this set is amazing for the colors you get. I don't always love marker sets just because I feel like you don't always get the best color combinations, but I use this set a lot and I love the variety. And of course it did come with some swatch paper and the infamous little plastic sheet to put behind your art to protect your sketchbook, which I feel like is the coolest thing. I know it's a small detail, but the thoughtfulness behind them including that little plastic sheet with their sets, to me, just shows that they really know and care about their consumers. Because yeah, you can just put a piece of scratch paper behind your art, but then you're wasting paper that you could use for other things. And I don't know, I really love this specific detail about Ohuhu. I honestly only have a couple complaints with the markers, and complaints is a bold word, because it doesn't really bother me that much. But first of all, is the nibs. I don't mind the shape, but the material that they're made out of, for me, it's the fact that they can kind of fray over time, which makes the fine point less fine. It's not the biggest deal, like, at all, but I do wish it didn't happen. And I should say, it's not like an instant thing, and I haven't noticed it with all of my markers yet, but I also haven't had my markers that long yet, so it's kind of just a wait and see thing. So maybe it's just a rare occurrence, but I do notice that difference when comparing it to Copic specifically. My other issue is the cap colors. As an artist, you should never rely on the cap colors to tell you what the ink color is going to look like on paper. There are so many variables here that can mislead you, and it's nearly impossible to get the plastic on the cap color to perfectly match the ink, I know. Plus, the paper you use can really affect the color of your ink as well. But between the two, Ohuhu has the least accurate cap colors in my opinion. Usually when you're looking for a specific color, you're kind of using the swatch of that color to help point your eyes to the right marker before you read, like, you know, the number or the marker name. But sometimes the cap colors are just so wildly off that I'm actually shocked. But again, overall, I know that that's not the biggest problem and it has nothing to do with the performance of the overall marker, so take that as you will. Now, one more thing I will say, and I have kind of noticed, is the color system. I've heard other artists complain about the color system not making much sense, and I think I do agree that it's a little chaotic. So the markers are assigned letters and numbers that are supposed to correspond with the colors, like BG for blue-green, but some of them just don't really make sense when you're looking at the whole system and the way that it's organized. I don't really know how to explain it, but it's never really bothered me that much, to be honest. And really, all of these quote-unquote complaints are more or less just about the design of the marker. Overall, I think the performance is amazing and it barely differs from Copic markers. I just really love Ohuhu's commitment to being affordable but providing like professional quality markers and making them accessible to everybody. Now on to Copic markers. If you've been around a while, you know how much I love Copic markers, and I have been using these for about 2 decades, which is insane. It is important to note, however, that Copic markers are designed to be professional quality for professional artists, and I do not mean that you can only use these if you're a professional. I just mean that these markers are designed to last. they weren't necessarily made to be affordable. That being said, these markers are listed on their website at about $7.99, which is a big difference from Ohuhu, but I have seen them listed a few dollars cheaper on other sites, so definitely check elsewhere first before you buy. And if you're watching this video around the time that it's uploaded, Copic is still having their really big site-wide sale right now, and you can still use my code from the previous video, which is Hope.25, to get 25% off your order of Copic markers. Again, this video is not sponsored by either brand. This is just a coupon that they've allowed me to give to you guys from a previous promotion that is still ongoing. And of course, they do sell ink refills and nib replacements on the website and other places too. Now, there are a few different varieties of Copic markers, but I specifically use the sketch markers, which have a brush and chisel tip. So as I mentioned, I've been using these markers for a very long time, so my collection is pretty large. However, a lot of my markers are dry or drying up, and I have a good amount of refills, but of course none of them are for the specific colors that I'm using in this video. So I do feel like that makes it a slightly unfair comparison because the Ohuhu markers I use are just newer and juicier. So there's a bit more unevenness overall on the Copic side. Now, my qualms with the Copic markers, obviously price is a pretty big turnoff for most people, which is completely understandable, but it is important to remember that Copic markers are a professional investment. When you buy one of these markers, you can expect to have it for a very long time. I literally still have the same markers that I bought in 2005, and yes, they still work, I still use them. I'm sure that Ohuhu markers last a long time too, but I can't personally speak on that because I've only had mine for a couple years. So we'll just have to see. Otherwise, my biggest issue with Copic is that I just wish they at least offered swatch cards with their sets. I haven't purchased a set in a long time, so maybe they changed it, but they don't come with swatch cards like most other marker brands do. They do have some available to purchase on their website, but as an artist who's already spending a fortune on their supplies, the last thing I want to buy is a swatch piece of paper that I could literally just make at home. Obviously, this isn't the end of the world, but I just feel like with almost every other marker brand that I've come across, they offer swatch sheets. And then you have Ohuhu, who goes above and beyond with the little plastic paper protectors. But again, that's more of a complaint on the business side, not so much on the marker performance or the ink quality, both of which I think are exceptional. That's pretty much all I could think of, though, to say for Copics, just because I've done a lot of videos and a lot of talking on how much I love these markers in particular. So if there's anything that I didn't answer for you in this video, please let me know in the comments and I'll do my best to answer. And I think really that's all I have to say in general to compare between the two. I am sorry if this is disappointing to any of you, but I'm not considering either side of this drawing a winner or a loser, because again, I really do love both of these brands and I use them both daily. This wasn't meant to be like a one brand versus the other video, more just an honest comparison if anybody is having a hard time trying to figure out the difference between the two. I think one is a great affordable option if you don't have the money to invest in Copic markers, and I think the other, being Copic markers, is a really great investment if you're looking for a marker that is going to last you a very long time. Again, I don't know how long Ohuhu markers last, I'm sure they last a long time too, but I do feel like Copic is more of a worthwhile investment. So it's really up to preference. If you have the chance to try both markers side by side, I encourage you do before you start collecting one or the other, because you might prefer the feeling of one to the other, or you might prefer the way the nib feels. It's really just personal preference. Again, the biggest differences to note is just the affordability versus the investment. But as far as my opinion goes, these two markers are literally the best. There are so many different brands out there with alcohol markers nowadays compared to when I was growing up, and none of them are the wrong choice, but these two will probably always remain at the top of the list for me. Hopefully this was helpful for any of you who were curious, or maybe you like both of these markers and just wanted to hear somebody else's thoughts. If you disagree or if you have anything to add, I'm very curious to hear, so please feel free to leave a comment. Otherwise, I'm gonna go ahead and end this voiceover here and let the video play out for the art, and I will see you all in the next video.